Well, joining me live now is former Howard Government Minister and Bondi Partners Senior Advisor Peter McGauran. Peter, thanks for your time this morning. Good to see you. I firstly want to get your thoughts on the LA fires there. It's just devastating and sadly a situation Australia knows all too well.
Sadly, that's absolutely right, Holly. People will recall the Black Saturday February fires in Victoria in 2009. We lost 176 lives, and as recently as 2020, New South Wales summer fires, we lost 26 people, and of course thousands and thousands of properties and livestock and wildlife. So Australians are well versed in the tragedy of wildfires.
Yeah, it's just devastating. The images we're seeing out of LA are just simply heartbreaking. There are no words to describe it. Of course, the main priority is people's well-being and getting the fire under control at this point in time. And it's not necessarily a time for finger pointing, but it is hard to ignore, Peter, some obvious failures here. What kind of responsibility should government officials take for the millions in funding cuts to the fire department and no water in the hydrants?
There'll be no hiding for the Mayor of Los Angeles and the Governor of California on this issue and the responsibilities as the public assign it, because after all, Holly, they will look at the commissions of inquiry that will inevitably follow, as they do our worst bushfires, as to the level of preparedness, the response. Now, and I suspect that they will be found wanting. Mitigating their culpability will, of course, be that this was the perfect storm. It was an urban fire with hurricane winds. But the fact is the fire hydrants did not provide sufficient, or in many cases, no water. And that is very symbolic of an incompetent maladministration. Water politics in California have always been ferocious. And President Trump has a history of it, of involving himself, because there's issues of storage, distribution. Water is scarce in California, and there are many demands on it from the manufacturing, agricultural sectors, the urban sprawl, and so on. So there's going to have to be a lot of self-examination, reflection, and action coming out of these tragedies.
Absolutely, and the insurance claims is just another horrible aspect of this too, as people begin to try and rebuild. I want to get your thoughts on some other news. Staying in the US, it's a big time at the moment there, but Trump will be inaugurated as a convicted felon, not something we've seen before. Do you think it will have any ramifications on his presidency?
No. If it was to have any ramifications, it would have been in the vote. The Americans see it as a private indiscretion of President Trump in regard to the woman involved and his attempts of a very minor, technical, if you like, a paper cover-up, and combined with all of his other legal actions, it hasn't influenced the voters. You're either supporting President Trump or you're against him, and this incident in the past and ongoing is not going to influence you.
Interesting. Well, I mean, Donald Trump has sent shockwaves throughout the world with his territorial claims on Canada, Greenland and Panama Canal over the last week. It's hard to ignore those. Do you think we should take him seriously? Oh,
very seriously. And all of those countries involved are as well. Holly, without giving a history or geopolitical lesson, we don't have the time, but you've got to understand the geography of all these places. The Panama Canal, for instance, every American child is taught about the American ingenuity and the financial muscle that connected the Atlantic and Pacific oceans. Greenland, America's had a military presence there, and base and naval facilities since the Second World War, and that's become very important with the melting of the polo caps, that there's increased shipping there. Canada, well, Canada's been a stand-up comics dream for decades and made light of by many comedians. But there's two states in Canada, Alberta and Saskatchewan, who actually have expressed interest in becoming part of America. So there's a history there. Trump's putting it all in the mix. We'll see where it falls out, but he's projecting American power, and that's what the Americans expect of him and want him to do. He is laying down the law that the Americans have vital economic and security and defence interests and won't be pushed around, and will stand up to Russia and China as a consequence.
Peter, we do have to wrap things up, but I want to lastly get your thoughts on something really important today. Back home, Josh Frydenberg has said that anti-Semitism will be a focus of the upcoming election. Of course, we've seen Labor in its unofficial pre-election campaign blitz over the last week. A vote here on cohesion, Mr Frydenberg claims here. Do you agree with that? And which party will be best suited to keep the Jewish community safe?
Entirely agree with Josh Frydenberg's comments. You can't overstate the disaster of the anti-Semitism that's so widespread in Australia across many sectors, especially the cultural sector. And we have to take a stand, and a principled one at that, and stare down the anti-Semitics. The fact is that the Jewish community have been drawn to the coalition, who've been unambiguously opposed to anti-Semitism and want to use Australian hate laws to curb it and to stamp it out. So politically, there's been a major shift overall in the Jewish community towards the coalition because they believe the Labor Party is domestically or internally conflicted between its large Muslim voting populations and its support of the principle of anti-Semitism.
OK, Peter, thank you as always for your time and analysis. Really appreciate it. Great to see you.
Thank you. Thank you, Holly.